everyone, it's Annabelle and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about a few little experiments that I'm running with different types of inorganic media. And as the first stage in this series, I wanted to compare a few different types of inorganic media that I either use routinely or I've picked up to try out for this experiment, in the hopes of kind of finding a better inorganic alternative that's more moisture retentive for my cooler growers or more moisture loving orchids. Now, in general, I use semi-hydro with leca for a lot of orchids. However, this doesn't meet the needs of all of the orchids that I've put in it. Particularly, I'm thinking of the Miltoniopsis and the Oncidium types that I've tried and it just hasn't worked with. And I believe that this is due to the dry top layer, and there may have been ways that I could have got it to work, i.e. by misting the top down more regularly, or potentially by covering the top or putting a layer of a different type of medium down on the top. But to be honest, that's quite a lot of hassle to maintain for a large amount of orchids. I don't want my media to be causing me more hassle. I'd rather just go back to sphagnum moss if it's going to be a case if I have to spray something down 3 times a day. That kind of defeats the whole purpose of making your life a bit easier with inorganic media. So I wanted to try out a few different types, and I have in previous videos mentioned Ceramis that I've been using with my cooler growing Masdevallias, which has been working really well. So I kind of wanted to expand upon that and maybe try it with a few different types of orchids and also explore the other inorganic alternatives that are out there. So I will just talk you through the little cups of inorganic media that I've got here. So what I did was, about a week ago, I filled up these little cups with different types of inorganic media, and I then filled them up to the same sort of level with water, just normal tap water. And I wanted to test how wicking these media were, and also how moisture retentive. So even if they're not wicking, if they're retaining a lot of moisture, that's the same sort of difference. It just means I wouldn't be able to use them in a self-watering setup maybe. But for a few of them, you can see the levels are different. It's very difficult to measure an exact level with some of these, so that is already a bit of a flaw in the experiment. I think that that's kind of redundant though, because the air pocket ratio is different in a lot of them, so I think that this is kind of, for me, this is good enough. I hope it's all right for you guys. They're roughly the same level, but obviously with some of them they are higher than the others, but then you've got more air pockets in the ones that are higher, so hopefully it does balance out. So here we've got my trusty leca beads, which can be both very good and very bad. They have properties that can lend themselves very well to certain types of orchids in certain setups, but can also be kind of bad in some setups. And for this, I'm talking about the dry top layer that you tend to get with leca. However, in this cup, I haven't actually got that. This has been a week since we've watered, and the top is still quite moist. So I think it might as well be because I've put the leca a little bit lower, whereas obviously usually I'd kind of fill more to the top of the pot to level with where the orchid's sitting. So already that's kind of a way that I can mitigate the dry top layer maybe if I chose to. You can see that it's much more moist at the bottom, and then it does get drier at the top. Now it's not bone dry, as you can see kind of from the shine and the colour, but it is definitely drier. Next, I have bought some rock wool. Now, I bought these as little rock wool cubes that you get from IKEA. They're actually not cubes, they're like cylinders. And what I did, because rock wool is incredibly moisture retentive, I broke them up into 4, so they're kind of more in strips, in an attempt to kind of imitate the strands that sphagnum moss would have. Now, this is incredibly moisture retentive. You can see it's not dried out at all, and it's also incredibly wicking. So I didn't actually wet all of these rock wool strands. I just filled the bottom up with water, and some of them were left dry, and that has wicked through to them. Just pop some gloves on for this, because rock wool can be an irritant. So if I just pick out one of these and show you. So that is a saturated rock wool segment. Can you see how much water that retained just in that little bit of rock wool? So this is incredibly soggy. However, we do have air pockets. So between the rock wool, there's a humid environment and the rock wool's going to stay very moist. However, I'd worry that when a root actually went into the rock wool, would it be a bit too moist? I've never used rock wool, I've never worked with rock wool. I've heard that it can also be very difficult to flush properly, so you can get salt accumulation, so you really need to be very careful with that when using it. But I kind of want to have a go with this, just for the sake of experimenting and seeing if I can get it to work in a setup. It might be awful, but it's certainly not going to have any dry top layer issues. So maybe I could use it in a mix, I was thinking, with leca. The issue with all of these inorganic medias compared to organic is they will all have a slightly alkaline pH, which does vary with each of them. Now going forwards, when I'm using them actually in setups, I will be measuring this and showing this. I've already shown with leca that it doesn't affect the pH too much. I pH down my nutrient solution anyway, and I check what's in the pot, so that's not too much of an issue. And indeed, with some types of orchids, such as some phragmipediums, you would want a more alkaline pH. So in terms of that, inorganic media might lend itself quite well to those kind of orchids. And the next inorganic media we've got here is a cupful of Ceramis. Now, I can only get the small grade Ceramis in my region. I know that there is a larger grade Ceramis, which I'd love to try, but it's very expensive to import it. So in the UK, we have this Ceramis available, and I can get this online from a couple of different hydroponic stores. I've actually just ordered some more because they had a bank holiday deal with it. And you can kind of see the moisture level is up to here. The Ceramis is very wet, but because it's a hard material, it's porous and it absorbs a lot of water, but it can't become as soggy as that rock wool can. So you are going to retain more air pockets, and the roots aren't going to actually go into this or anything. So you are going to get a much more moisture retentive media, which you can then mix with things like leca to create a few more air pockets, which is what I've done for my Masdevallias, and they really enjoy the Ceramis. So I really want to get into using Ceramis a little bit more and experimenting with that. And I'll come on to later a couple of plans that I have with Ceramis and with these inorganic media. A couple of experiments that I've done that have maybe been successful. So we've talked about these three at the front. Next one that I wanted to try out was lava rock, and I actually couldn't get hold of lava rock easily. I found some on Amazon, and the reviews basically said that it was mostly just river rock with a few bits of lava rock chucked in. So I actually went to my local aquatic store, and the aquatic store did have lava rock, but it was £30 for a small bag. The bag was only maybe 3 litres or something like that. It was a very small bag, and it was £30. So I was kind of like, well, I just wanted to try it for an experiment. And the aquatic store actually sold me this ceramic media. And they basically, you can get it in much smaller packets, and they sold it to me because they sell it as a superior alternative to lava rock. They say that it's as porous, if not more porous than lava rock, and it's pH neutral and won't alter the pH of the water. So they sort of sell it as an inert media. So I thought I'd give this a try for orchids as an alternative to lava rock. Obviously it might not hold quite the same properties as lava rock, and I guess I'm not going to really know the difference. You guys might have to tell me what your experiences with lava rock are, but I soaked this before I did this experiment because I kind of thought, well, it's not going to be particularly wicking probably because of all of those air pockets. So we'll see how much water it can retain. So I soaked it and then filled up the reservoir. And to me, it still feels very dry at the top here. It kind of looks a bit wetter, a little bit more damp around maybe the middle, but the top is very dry. This one feels a little bit more damp. So it's very difficult to gauge how much water that has retained. I was speaking to someone on here recently who said that they used it in semi-hydro, and another person suggested that they use it for dendrobiums, for seedlings that are prone to rot easily because it doesn't stay as soggy as leca can. So yeah, I'm not exactly sure how to use this or what to use it with. My kind of idea was maybe to use it with my vandas that I've got in baskets as an inorganic alternative to bark to hold on a bit more moisture. It doesn't seem to be holding that much moisture. So we'll have to see how this goes, and I'll think up a way to test the properties of this more fully, because this kind of looking at them in cups really doesn't tell us how an orchid is going to react with them. I think this is the first stage, and check that they're not like incredibly dry or have any other properties that are unsuitable, like a really high pH, which this one doesn't. I have checked these all, and these are all kind of the same as leca really. Slightly alkaline, but it's between pH 7.5 and 8 for most of them, the water that they've been soaking in, so it's not massively alkaline. Now I also just picked up a top layer material, which also said you could use it as plant media. It looks like quartz to me. It's very sparkly and pretty. I don't know how suitable this would be. It's, yeah, I'm not so sure on this one. It does seem to have retained some moisture. They do feel a little bit damp, but I really am not, I'm not convinced on this one. Just a bit worried about the type of rock that it is. So I think I'm probably going to give that a miss for use as an orchid media. Just kind of alarm bells are ringing. It looks a little bit too, I don't know, cosmetic. Maybe we'll try it with something. Maybe I'll think of something to try it with. Something else that I have had for a while actually, and never really found a use for other than mixing it with bark for more aeration, is pumice. Now this is large grade pumice that I bought from Orchid Garden. They sell it in reasonably big bags. So I thought I'd just try this out and see what the properties are like. And it's actually either incredibly absorbent or incredibly wicking, and I can't figure out whether it's actually sucking the water or whether it's just because it's got so many air pockets and it's very porous that the water's just staying trapped in there. But even the top layer is feeling slightly damp to touch. So maybe I can use this as an alternative to lava rock to stay a little bit more moist, but it looks very airy still. So pumice is looking really good as inorganic media. So I might have to give this a try with maybe some phalaenopsis or something and see how it goes. Then lastly, this is called Horticultural Grit, and I use this in with my adeniums to kind of provide more drainage to the mix, but I did notice that it's also suitable for use as alpine media on its own. And I noticed that whenever I opened a bag of this that it's always very wet when you open it. And can you see how moist it is in between these? And I think this is purely because it's got such small air pockets, like it's really tightly packed. There's not a great amount of drainage. The water hasn't evaporated at all. The level has pretty much stayed there. And it's kind of damp up to about here. And then there's a slightly drier top layer. Now, I probably wouldn't use this on its own for an orchid, unless it was an orchid that really liked moist media. However, I was thinking I could possibly use this as a top dressing for leca, potentially, because it's basically trapping the moisture level in the bottom there. So yeah, I know a lot of people use river rock as well. Obviously with river rock you'd need to be watering every day because it's not moisture retentive at all, it's just pebbles basically. And I saw that Rick was talking about using smaller grade kind of gravel for more moisture loving orchids, because he uses a lot of inorganic media, obviously because it traps more water in it. It's a more suitable option for more moisture loving orchids to go for a smaller grade kind of gravel. So those are kind of the medias that I've got to try out, and there are a few that I might give a miss. So I'm thinking this, I might not use that. Maybe I'll use it as a top dressing, I don't know. And this one I may not use on its own. I just feel like the properties aren't quite what I'm looking for. The air pockets are, it looks like a suffocating mix. It's very, very heavy as well, compared to the Ceramis, which is incredibly light. So I feel like the Ceramis has much more in the way of air pockets through the actual Ceramis, because it's obviously a clay media and it's porous and breathable. Whereas this, I just feel like it's a very heavy, non-aerated mix of gravels. So I'm not sure that would be suitable for orchids on its own, but mixed with other things, maybe. So I think the things I'm going to be taking forward to do experiments with on their own are these, and maybe I'll find a way of using these in combination or as a top layer or something. But these ones I think are the ones that I'm going to be using as primary orchid media, maybe mix them with a few other things. Try and test out inorganic alternatives and the properties of each and which types of orchids kind of respond best to each type. Now I don't have loads of orchids that I'm willing to kind of put into this experiment, so it's just kind of going to be a case of when I have an orchid that I want to repot and I kind of think might suit one of these medias, I'll probably put it in. For example, I've recently transitioned a couple more orchids into Ceramis leca mixes, including some Restrepias and a Stellis, as well as a young Phragmipedium that I've got. So I just wanted to see whether it was a viable option for those orchids, and I just want to show you briefly some of the orchids that I'm keeping in these mixes. So recently I did a video on semi-hydro, which I will link you to, and discuss the kind of pros and cons to growing in semi-hydro and what I'm growing in semi-hydro at the moment. I kind of just wanted to give you a bit of an update on one of the orchids that I've actually recently tried in semi-hydro, and it seems to have worked really well. So I mentioned recently in a Vanda update video that I had a keiki on my Aerides Halluciana, which was separated from the parent plant when I went to unpot it. It was already separated. I think it must have been knocked off in a nursery when they did a repot. But I kind of thought this would be a good opportunity to try it in semi-hydro, because all of my Aerides seem to really love a lot of moisture and they seem to be doing really great in pots with bark sphagnum mixes. So I bit the bullet while I had that option of taking a cake, basically the same plant. It's the closest I'm going to get to the same plant, and having one in a bark moss mix and one in semi-hydro and seeing how they do. And we've already got new root growth. This was only a couple of weeks ago actually. Can you see how it's they've grown around the leca? And this one here is kind of tunnelling into the leca there. These ones are new root tips that have emerged from an old root. Yeah, so it's doing really well. So that's my Aerides Halluciana keiki that's actually doing well in semi-hydro. So who would have thought? It goes to show that I've tried semi-hydro with Vandas before, but maybe they were the wrong Vandas or at the wrong stage of growth, because it can clearly work for some Vandaceous types. Obviously an Aerides is distinct from a classical Vanda, but Aerides and Rhyncha stylus in general seem to like a little bit more moisture, and I do have some Rhyncha stylus in semi-hydro, some Rhyncha stylus giganteas. So maybe it's not such a huge surprise that this Aerides would do well, but I was, yeah, very pleasantly surprised by how well it's doing. So I will wait to see the results for a little bit longer before I transition the other plant into it, or more of my Aerides. But yeah, I'm really happy with that. I also have some Angrecums doing very well in semi-hydro. And I grow a lot of my Cattleyas in semi-hydro. I've shown you this guy before with leca. I need to do a repot on him soon, so I will film that. This is my Stellis Emarginata, or so I thought, that I put into a Ceramis mix and produced a flower spike for me. And if my camera will focus on these tiny little things, these are not Stellis Emarginata flowers. They are, I believe, Stellis argentata or argent something. I put a message up on Instagram saying I wasn't exactly sure what these were, and that was kind of the common consensus that came back. So I will put that up on screen, what people thought it was. But yeah, it's not exactly what I wanted. They're still really cute though. But yeah, it's doing well in this Ceramis mix. And if I just show you the roots, they've actually started coming out the side of the pot. So you can see there's one root there starting to come out. There's another root there with a nice little growing root tip. Yeah, it seems to be doing really well. It's got a lot of root growth there. Sorry, the moss is currently I think this is how it reproduces. So I think those are moss seed pods. But behind there you've got a lot of roots. I like having that top layer of moss on the top. One, because it looks nice, and two, because it seems to stop any issues with algae buildup on the top. If it's a choice between a nice fluffy moss layer on the top, which doesn't like a lot of nutrients and won't be stealing nutrients from my orchid, versus algae, I will go with the moss layer 100% of the time. It also helps to keep the moisture in that top layer. And this one I filmed an update on with my Masdevallia update, so I'm not going to go too much into it. I just want to show you the root growth quickly. Yeah, so you can see it clearly is enjoying my Ceramis leca mix here. We've got roots going all the way down there into the bottom. Oh, I've just knocked a root that was coming out the side. There's a root going into the reservoir there. And I got these little pots yesterday from IKEA, and they fit perfectly with my 11cm clear pots that I get from my local garden centre, which are quite cheap, and they give me a perfect kind of semi-hydro alternative that fits a ceramic outer pot. So yeah, I'm really happy about that. So yeah, this is my Masdevallia paviana, which is the one that I did the matched kind of control with, where I had one in moss and one in semi-hydro with Ceramis and leca. And the one in Ceramis did a lot better, so I switched them both over to Ceramis probably about a month ago. This is the one that was in Ceramis from the beginning, so this is the one that's had the best opportunity to grow, and it has grown a lot recently actually, probably even since the update. And you can see all of the all of the new growths here. Yeah, it's doing really well, so maybe it'll spike for me soon, because I do have one of my Masdevallias preparing a spike, so you never know. And I recently transitioned one of my Restrepias into this setup as well. So this is my Restrepia cuprea, and they have incredibly fine roots. I didn't transition this very long ago, but you can see the actively growing root tips there against the side of the pot. And since I repotted it, even because I kind of put it a bit higher in the pot, the root system was kind of around here. So you can see that these have grown since I've repotted it into the Ceramis. This one is clinging to the leca there. So you can kind of see that it's grown a lot even in the few weeks that I've had it in this system. So yeah, my cooler growers seem to really like these clay outer pots with a self-watering semi-hydro type system with Ceramis and leca mix. Seem to really enjoy that. And quickly, I'll just show you one of my Phalaenopsis that I bought in a haul recently from Orchid Garden. So this is the Bellina red apple, whose bud looks about ready to burst there actually, and it's also worked on another bud while it's been doing that. So you can see there's another bud developing there. And I wanted to show you this one because I had a few questions after I repotted my Orchids Deluxe order saying, would the roots die off now that I'd repotted, and would I have to wait for new root growth? So this one I repotted immediately after my Orchid Garden order. You can see that none of the roots died off, and the root tips just kind of continued to grow. You can see how fuzzy they've got where they've hit the moisture there. So yeah, lots of growing root tips still. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to show you that quickly because I did have some questions of people saying how would they adapt. And for me, Phalaenopsis don't have that many issues adapting. So I just wanted to kind of show you guys that. Which is why I really like inorganic media, and inorganic media will never break down, it will never acidify, so you're never going to have broken down acidifying media that'll kill your roots off. You may need to pH, but I kind of pH anyway, so this is kind of my quest for finding inorganic alternatives at the moment, because many of my orchids are in moss, and I love moss, I love sphagnum moss, but it's getting incredibly hard for me to find the Besgrow sphagnum variety that I like. And it's also incredibly expensive actually, with a yearly repot with a lot of orchids in sphagnum. It does become incredibly pricey. So, and the yearly repot is, you know, if I can avoid repotting every year, I would, because let's face it, every time you repot an orchid, some roots get broken. No matter how good you are, especially with oncidiums that are just packed full of roots, you end up breaking a few and setting the orchid back a bit. So yeah, they do a lot better if you can avoid that. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to update you on what my thoughts are at the moment on my setups, and some changes that are going to be happening, and some experiments that I'm going to be running and kind of filming with you guys. So I'd be really keen to hear your comments, especially if you've got any experience with working with inorganic medias, or any questions about them, particularly the lava rock thing. I'm really not sure how similar this is to lava rock, whether lava rock is supposed to be more wicking than this media, or whether this is a good ceramic alternative to lava rock. But yeah, let me know in the comments down below if you've got any questions or what you think about this. And another thing that I would like to say quickly is that I've recently hit 500 subscribers on my channel. So I actually just really wanted to thank you guys for sticking with me, actually, because you've been incredibly supportive, and it's been really great chatting to you and having this outlet to kind of talk to people about orchids and communicate with the orchid community and get kind of ideas and feedback. And I've really enjoyed kind of this filming experience, and I hope to improve and continue to set up new experiments and update you guys. And I hope you guys continue to enjoy watching, because I'm really enjoying the whole YouTube experience. And thank you so much for your support and watching my videos and not being sick of me yet, I hope. So I will see you guys later, and thanks so much for watching this video again. If you did enjoy this video, then give it a like or subscribe to my channel for more regular orchid updates, and I will see you guys later. Bye!